So this is the podcast, So You Think You Can Write. So I'll be interviewing another author later, and I'm just gonna continue with this author interview series. And interspersed in between the author interview series are also our resources, and I'll be talking about topics that are pertinent to or important to self-published authors. But it's really great that I've been able to interview authors and that are doing this full time. They actually do this for a living. They do self-publishing. And the second author that I'm going to interview, he actually does both. He did traditional publishing, and he also is doing right now self-publishing. So it's going to be an interesting interview for sure. So I'm just going to do a brief bio of our author. So our author's name is Michael Angel. And here's his brief bio. So he's a full-time fiction and nonfiction writer. And his books have been published both independently and by conventional publishers out of New York City. So he's the author of the 10-book epic fantasy series, Fantasy and Forensics, where C.S. Lewis meets CSI. So right now he's writing the Wildfire Pathogen, and it's actually very zeitgeist. It's actually very current because he's writing about a pathogen, and his fourth book is called The Plague Walker, and it's a medical thriller series. So, hi.
Hey.
Yeah, my name is Genie, and I'm interviewing authors for my podcast. It's for self-publishing, and thank you very much for responding to me.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah. So I read your bio, and it says you're in New York right now. Are you based in New York?
No, actually, I was originally based in California. I'm out actually in Texas right now.
Oh, what was that New York bio you sent me? You mentioned something about New York in your bio?
I've been published by several conventional publishers in New York, the standard legacy publishers, as well as doing independent publishing on my own. So I know a little bit about both systems.
Ah, that's great. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So you're in you're in Texas right now. I'm also in Texas. That's where in Texas are you?
I'm in Austin, actually.
Oh, I'm in Houston, Texas.
Oh, yeah, I know Houston. I used to work down, I did consulting work down at the Space Center down there, the Johnson Space Center.
Yeah, I just got here in March, actually, before the coronavirus closure. So I'm like you in Houston, too.
Wow. Well, keep an umbrella around because you'll experience a lot of rain there in the summer and the fall.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's been raining. And I lived in New Mexico for a year, and it's been different. It's really different.
What part of New Mexico did you live in?
I lived in, I lived in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And also in Carlsbad, New Mexico. It's more in the north. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've been in Santa Fe and Albuquerque a whole bunch of times, once in Taos, and even went up to the Four Corners region for a while. So fairly familiar. I love New Mexico.
Yeah, it is interesting place. It's very interesting. It's so different from Houston. I think my dog wants to join us. He's always
We'll be lucky if my cat doesn't want to join us by the end of this.
Yeah, because he'll just continue to bark. So he's been interrupting. Yeah. So thank you very much for responding. But how
Sure.
are you guys doing? And we have to discuss what's going on, like the virus and stuff. So are you guys are you guys still closed?
Well, just like you in Houston, Governor Abbott started reopening the state phase 1 on May the 1st. So at least we have a few stores that are opening. There's a couple of restaurants which are doing very limited seating, and they're going to try this out until May 18th, and they'll see whether we get to open up any further. Beyond that, I mean, just you know how it is. If you're a writer, this doesn't affect you quite as much because you don't have to commute into a specific area. If you work full time, the quarantine just gives you a further excuse to get more work done. So that's a plus, I suppose, of working as a writer.
Yeah. I actually work as a healthcare worker by day, and I'm doing this at night and on the weekend. So it's.
Are you finding your burden a little bit heavier now, or more people showing up with symptoms of COVID-19?
No, luckily, no. I work in a long-term facility, so we have to be careful because, like, it's dangerous actually. Like, it just takes one, but they check our temperature and stuff. So
Yeah,
everybody.
you work with a lot of immunocompromised people, I can imagine.
Yeah, so it's a scary time, but yeah, I know. And I read your bio, and it says you do the forensic, and it's more the medical thrillers, and um, you do the fantasy and the forensic.
Yeah, let me do a quick talk about that. When I started working as a independent author, I started out publishing these. This is my first fantasy series, was fantasy and forensics, and this is Centaur of the Crime. This turned into a decology, a 10-book series, and the hook here is, if you know fantasy author C.S. Lewis, this is C.S. Lewis meets CSI. So we actually have a forensics analyst from the LAPD gets pulled into another world, a fantasy world, that has to solve a crime there. So that actually turned to be a pretty good seller. It's one that's generated a lot of back sales for me, particularly on Kindle Unlimited. From
Mhm.
there, I decided I wanted to keep similar topics but a different genre, and ended up writing this. This here is The Devil's Noose. This is
Mhm.
the first of three, soon to be four books in the Plague Walker pandemic series. And so I've ended up talking with a lot of people, epidemiologists and other folks like that, to make sure I have a modicum of some truthfulness in there, that at least I get the terms right.
Oh, okay. That's really actually so you started writing those books, I'm sure, before everything happened. So when did you start the first book in your plague series, like the pandemic series?
The Plague series, actually, I started a little bit more than a year ago.
Wow.
So that had been probably last February or so, and it did very well. I was surprised how well it did. And then I've steadily added to it. I have two more books. So it's technically a trilogy now. There's also a Magnet book I have, Small Develop. And the fourth one will be coming out. That's my coronavirus era tale, because I started that back in November. And here's the funny thing: the organism, the killer bug, as I call it in this one, was going to be a coronavirus of all things.
Wow. I'm gonna read that. Wow.
Yeah, when it comes out, it's called the Wildfire Pathogen. And I did change it because that felt a little too close. And I even asked my newsletter. I have a small group of fans, not a huge number. I'm not a bestseller, I'm a mid-list writer. But I asked them, should I continue with this? Or are you guys so tired of hearing about medical pandemics that you don't want to see another medical book for a while? And they came down 95% in favor if they wanted the next book. They understand, I think, the audience understands this is escapism, and we'd like to see the good guys win. It's something that'd be very, very pleasant for them.
So, but is it set in? Is it still like fantasy, or is it set in the present moment? Like,
Nope, it's set in the present. This is not fantasy. It's just moved straight into straight medical thriller now. I'll
ah,
admit there's not a lot of overlap at first glance, but there's some medical elements that are similar between the two series.
okay, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it's like really timely. Like, how did you come up with the plot of all things? Like, why the coronavirus? And it's very timely. I'm sure a lot of people are buying it right now because it's very timely.
Well, I think medical thrillers have been one of those genres that are a little bit underserved in general. Give you an idea, and by the way, if anybody's watching this, if you record this, if anybody's watching, I'm not bad mouthing any other authors here, but I honestly thought there was a little bit of underserved audience in this. Some of the best-selling medical thrillers from independent authors right now are really crazy. I mean, they're not what I'd call hard science-based medical thrillers. They're about things like Nazi submarines found in the ice in Antarctica, which release pathogens that are going to bring aliens down to change us. Things like that. It's wacky, really wild stuff. Not knocking you if you like it, but I was trying to bring a little more element of realism into the medical thriller.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think it is an underserved thing because I think Michael Crichton came up with a book before Outbreak or something. Was it Outbreak or something?
Actually, the book he came up with probably is the modern medical pandemic thriller. It was called The Andromeda Strain.
Oh yeah.
Before that, about a decade or two before that, the modern medical thriller was pretty much invented by a fellow named Robin Cook, who wrote a book called Coma. That's been made into a movie a couple of times. You may have seen it. And Outbreak, I can't remember who wrote that, but that was made into a movie with Dustin Hoffman. So I think it's a perennial type of topic that renews itself. You could argue that for fantasy as well. I mean, shoot, let's be honest, Harry Potter's been the most popular thing in decades. But in this particular case, I didn't write it because it was timely, like I expected the coronavirus. I just felt the genre was underserved. And so far, my guesses have been right from what I can tell.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you like come up with the plots through a dream or, sorry, I'm gonna get my dog.
What's his name?
Bacon, sorry. He really wants to be in the show or,
Anybody named Bacon is good in my book.
yeah. So do you come up with your plot while you're dreaming, or does it come to you like when you're doing something else? Like how does the creative process work for you?
Oh man, that's a question for the ages, isn't it? Um, Concepts come sometimes just bit by bit, and you decide to put it together and think, oh, that would be really cool to do something like that. For example, in The Devil's Noose, when I first came up with that, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we could find proof that the asteroid was not the only thing that wiped out the dinosaurs 65 million years ago? What if it was a microbe that helped the process along? And what if that microbe, which killed almost everything on the planet, got loose again? And that was the basis, just asking that question and letting things roll from there.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought it was just the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. So there's,
Well, we don't know, but it's possible. So, I mean, it's fiction.
yeah.
I say we go with it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And you mentioned that why are you choosing this like genre? Why not the other genres? Like why are you interested in forensic pathology? Do you have or like medical thrillers? Do you have a medical background?
Oh, sort of. I don't want to overplay it here, but let me tell you, way back in the midst of time, I was an attorney actually,
Wow, wow.
and I did an internship with the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. While I was there, I became very good friends with the coroner, partly because she was actually kind of cute, but the other thing is because I learned forensic pathology was the key to solving many of the crimes they were bringing up. In fact, I even won a mock trial based on finding out some forensic evidence that the other side didn't have. It was proving whether or not somebody was speeding, and I was the only one to figure out, hey, let's measure the tire tracks and see whether that car could have left a 30-foot skid mark if it was going 20 miles an hour, which it couldn't. So that brought an interest. Later on in my career, I left the legal field. I ended up working with a company called Ares Corporation. Now, Ares was working on an anti-bioterrorism detection device. This was after 9/11. And again, I became good friends with one of the world's greatest epidemiologists, in my opinion. I can't tell you his name because he hasn't given me permission to share it. But he was the one who gave me the ideas for going out and learning about this and putting it later in my books. To give you an example, you lived in New Mexico. Do you remember in the mid-90s, there was an outbreak of hantavirus in New Mexico? No? This was fascinating. Can I tell you the story? I think you might find it interesting. There was an outbreak of a new, brand new novel type of hantavirus in northwestern New Mexico. Specifically, it was affecting people who lived on places like the Navajo Reservation out near Shiprock. And they couldn't figure out what was causing it, and it was killing some of the most fit young people around. It was not that contagious, but it was incredibly lethal, probably about 40% fatality rate. And I actually got to go and follow up how they figured out what this was. And it was actually caused by an explosion in the deer mice population. So really, the outbreaks were tied into, get this, it was tied into El Nino. When there was an El Nino cycle, that part of New Mexico would get more rain, would cause more grass to grow, and you'd have an explosion in field mice for the ones that carried the virus. Side note, which I think is kind of funny, viruses are named from the places they originate, which is probably why COVID-19 probably should be called the Wuhan virus, Wuhan coronavirus eventually. At the time, they were going to call it Four Corners hantavirus. And there were 4 states tourism boards that said, don't call it that because we don't want people to avoid 4 corners, right? And they kicked around different names for it. Nobody wanted to get stuck with the name of a killer virus. So officially, it is known as sin nombre. Do you know what that means?
No, what does that mean?
Sin nombre is no name. It literally is the killer with no name.
Wow.
So you see, stuff like that, easily you can put that in a book. It sounds great.
Yeah, it's like and it's also based in real life.
Yes, it's absolutely true. All of it.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So I know now why you did the forensic thing, but why combine it with fantasy? Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. There's 2 reasons. Number one, I firmly believe if you're going to get into writing full time, You have to write what you like to read. I mean, that's what makes it fun. And I liked fantasy. I'm off that kick now a little bit. I've read a lot of it. And if you write 10 book novels worth, that's something like about 500,000 words of fantasy. You sometimes need a break. But at the time, I wanted to write something. I thought that was cool. And I was at a seminar being held by a very good writer, mentor of mine, a lady named Chris Rush. And she was talking about coming up with new ideas. Remember the creativity thing we're talking about. She said, take an idea, give it a brand new spin, give it a new coat of paint, give it a new direction, and you'll be able to really come across and do something new. So the example she took was the fantasy author C.S. Lewis. He's the one who wrote Narnia and a few other ones, right? She said, what about C.S. Lewis on speed? C.S. Lewis on this, C.S. Lewis on that? And people are taking notes. And I thought, what about C.S. Lewis meets CSI? And what I like about that is it's alliterative, C.S. Lewis, CSI. And when you tell the concept to people, they get it. They kind of go, they laugh and go, that's good. In other words, they get it, like, okay, it's fantasy, but it's got like forensics science in it, CSI stuff. Oh, that sounds cool. Nobody's done that before. And it's a very good way to encapsulate what you're trying to do. I know we're talking about starting out in writing and getting into independent publishing and writing. One of the things I try to tell people is, this sounds very Hollywood, but if you can't explain to me the concept of your novel in a couple of sentences, really boil it down, then you're going to have a very difficult time getting readers to buy it because they have to understand the concept behind it. All of the great movies, almost all of them can be boiled down into 2, maybe 3 sentences. I'll give you an example. Let's say I was writing a legal thriller. Legal thrillers are a dime a dozen. It's hard to get people excited, right? Ooh, lawyer joins law firm. Ooh, how exciting. But what if the law firm in question was run by the mafia, and once you joined, you could never leave? That's the plot of The Firm, for example.
Yeah.
How about we have a submarine captain? He needs a new first executive officer because this is sick. They join. They don't really get along that well. Doesn't sound that interesting to me, but what if it becomes World War III and those two are at odds of whether they should launch their nuclear missiles or not? That's the plot of Crimson Tide. You see how it's an idea that's pretty standard, but let's give it a spin on this. And there you go.
That's amazing. Yeah. You're right. That's amazing. I'm interested. I think I'm going to buy your medical thriller book. Because it's like, yeah, wow. And I'm going to check out your C.S. Lewis and the CSI. Because that's interesting. You're right. Yeah. So it seems like you're mentioning blurbs, which a lot of writers always say the blurb is very important, like to encapsulate like the story, that like first few lines that will explain what your story is about. So it seems like you're talking about the blurb.
Yep, there's a number of different things. Some people like to call it an elevator pitch, that you can pitch it to somebody in an elevator as they go down 10 floors. A blurb is a good way. I'm of the opinion that it's important. People have a lot of problems with it because they've written the book, spent a year, 5 years on their life on it, and it's hard for them to encapsulate it because they are too close to the story, right? I'm of the opinion, come up with your blurb before you start. Envision what you're going to have it on the back of your book before you start. This will help you focus on what your book is really about. Okay, let's imagine you're writing a medical thriller, right? And you think this thriller is about corruption in a hospital. But as you kind of get into writing the plot, you write out the summary, you realize, ooh, the real drama is between whether this person will choose the person they love or their job. And that has to be in the blurb of, in the medical field, how far would you go to protect someone you care about? Or something like that. That will tell you the true core of your book. You see?
Yeah, that's great. That's a great tip. Yeah, I'm like changing the blurb too. Yeah, I'm changing my blurbs because it's like really, and in fact, some authors actually hire someone else to write their blurb. Do you do that?
I've never done that myself, but if I was stuck, if I'd written a book, it's been 5 years of my life, and I just had no way to encapsulate it, or whatever I came up with was inadequate. I mean, say Gone with the Wind. You could say the blurb for that is man avoids war draft, but that doesn't really help because it doesn't encapsulate everything the book's about. Yeah, if you're stuck on it, by all means, hire somebody, ask around. What I would do though is, even if you come up with yourself or you hire somebody else, take that blurb, kind of memorize it, and run it by your friends, just people who know what you're up to. Like they say, how's your book coming along? And you say, oh, let me tell you something. I'm writing this book right now, and it's asking, what if two people had to bridge the ultimate chasm between meeting and love, that they both have completely different political candidates they support? And if their eyes light up like, ooh, that sounds interesting, you have something. If they go, oh, that's nice, didn't quite hit the mark, try it. You'll see. There's a look people get of, ooh, I want to see that. Case in point, there was a fellow who wrote a vampire story, tried for many years to get it produced as a film, until he finally came up with the perfect blurb for it. He actually did get a producer in the elevator and pitched to him.
Wow.
If I remember correctly, it went, all right, 300 vampires descend on a small town. It's in Alaska, and the night lasts 6 months long. Ooh, that became the movie 30 Days of Night.
Yeah.
You see how
I
that
saw
took
that.
Yeah, well, now you know that took an idea, but it grabbed you, didn't it? Like, oh yeah, what if vampires could just run around for 6 months and kill anybody they wanted because they're up in Alaska and nobody can help you? Ooh. So you see, it's actually a lot of fun to come up with this and build your book around it.
That's great. Yeah. And that's very interesting. Yeah. And I think you're right. It has to be like, it has to stand out, you know, what makes it different from other books out there. And it really does have to stand out, because otherwise, and I heard, aside from the book cover, it's the blurb as well that will draw the reader to actually read your book. You know, it's the blurb and what the book is about, aside from the book cover, but the book cover is also like the main thing as well that catches their eye.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So speaking about book covers, I really like your book covers. So you hire like professionals?
Yeah, in the case, let me show you the two covers here again. In the case of The Devil's News, this whole picture, I purchased the cover pre-made from a company that specializes in doing thrillers, action, post-apocalyptic, because they had the right sensibility. If I went to somebody who did romance covers, probably they'd have a tougher time coming up with something that sells the idea of a medical thriller. So that's one. In the case of fantasy, this here was actually a painting that I purchased from a very nice artist over in the UK, who I just liked their work, and I approached them and I hired them to do all the covers pretty much for the whole decology. And the reason I did that is because fantasy, more so than the other genres, you kind of have to get a feel for what you're going to get. What I mean by that is, if your book is called The Dragon Riders of Kern, I better see a dragon on that cover, or it's not going to sell. If my book is about griffins, there better be a griffin. Or even if the title is nondescript, The Seven Swords, let's call it. If I have a griffin, a dragon, and a unicorn on the cover, well, I better have a griffin, a dragon, and a unicorn in that book, because that sets the reader expectation.
Ah, that's amazing. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's a very good tip for people that are starting out in publishing.
I think so. I'll tell you one thing that if you want to follow up on the tip on cover, especially if you write fantasy, or even if you say write romance, let's imagine you find a perfect cover, a cover that could go for your book, and the heroine is blonde hair, but the heroine in your book has dark hair. Well, unless you want to pay $500, change your heroine's color to black hair or something. Or if the dragon's purple and your book here dragon's green, change the dragon so it's purple, or change a scene so that when your character meets the dragon for the first time, the shade of the light makes it look purple. You see what I'm getting at is you'll never find the perfect cover if it's pre-made, but sometimes you can adjust your book so that it reflects it. I cheated one time, book number 7, which I don't have here, but book number 7 in my fantasy. I had a fantastic cover that I couldn't really use from my artist. So I made it part of a dream sequence in book number 7. That's it. And I got the cover to use.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I think the book is the first thing that people see, and that sets their expectations.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I said the only thing I could think of is if you were going to purchase a piece of pre-made art or a pre-made cover, the main thing to consider is that most of us sell ebooks nowadays, not paperbacks. So try to look at it as you would see it on a thumbnail. A lot of great pieces of art don't work as thumbnails. They're too busy. You can't see anything. You have to be able to make out at least something on the cover, like your name, the title, what's going on action-wise, that sort of thing.
Ah, Yeah. So, speaking of titles, though, because aside from a good blurb and a good book cover, I think the titles are important as well. How do you come up with your titles?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, my fantasy series was easy. I decided to stick to alliteration and crimes. This is Centaur of the Crime. Some of the other titles in the series are things like Forgery of the Phoenix. You have two F's there, and we have a phoenix in the story. Another one is A Perjury of Owls. No alliteration, but we know there's going to be the crime perjury, and we're going to have intelligent owls in the book. That
Ah,
was easy to pick those out. The Devil's Noose I picked along the lines of that was the term, I kid you not, the Latin term I picked for the organism, the killer Whatsit in the book. Literally comes out to Nosticales diabolus, or the Devil's Noose.
ah, yeah. Because the Devil's News and even the book cover, it was really eye-catching. You know,
Yeah,
it's if I'm browsing Amazon Kindle right now, I'm gonna look at it and I'm like, oh, this looks like eye-catching, and the title is interesting. I'm gonna read the blurb, and then once you read the blurb, oh, okay.
yeah, and you know what? Sometimes it's hit or miss. You have to. It's just a matter of trying to figure out your audience. My second book did not have as catchy a cover, and the title didn't work as well. The title was called The Reaper's Scythe. May have been too death-oriented. Who knows? The third book had a slightly, I think, better cover. You have to look it up on Amazon, but it's called The Blood Zone, and that
Oh,
grabbed people. The Blood Zone. Ooh, I don't know what that is, but I've got to see that. So yeah, sometimes you just have to experiment and try it.
yeah, yeah. That's what I've been hearing as well from authors. They just experiment. If this one step A doesn't work, you experiment and do this one step B, and then you just switch it up and stuff. Like an author that I interviewed last week as well, who's into time travel, and yeah, he says there's really no set formula. What he said it what works for you, so you just have to, experiment or like just try it out. Yeah.
And you have to see what your audience responds to. What people want to see in different genres will vary dramatically depending what genre it is. One book I might recommend you or your viewers take a look at is one about studying the market. It's by a gentleman named Chris Fox. Do a
Oh.
search on Amazon, Chris Fox. Not I don't remember the exact title of the book, but he found out with his research, looking at genre tropes. He writes, I think, military sci-fi. And he found out people respond to that genre if you've got, surprise, surprise, a big starship on the cover, right? Big starship, thrusters, maybe lasers going off, that kind of thing. But if you're reading, say, romance, most often people respond to, say, a couple on the cover. Or if it's a hot romance, you're usually going to have what I call the pecs and ab cover, where you see the guy's pecs and abs on that. There's a tremendous number of subgenres in there that will set your expectation. Is this a PG romance? Is this a X-rated romance? You will be able to tell by looking at the cover about what level of heat you're going to get, and that again will set the expectations of your audience.
Yeah, it's funny because I just discovered Chris Fox last week actually, and
Mm-hmm.
I downloaded all of his audiobooks. I'm right now just reading 5,000 words per hour. So, yeah, he's wonderful, and I'm like I downloaded all of his books. It's more like reading it while I'm in the car. So, but yeah, he is great. I think he's one of the best. Um, he provides you with the information that you need. There's no padding in it and stuff.
Absolutely, I agree. He's fantastic. There's a lot more people that just are not. They're very good, but he's so accessible. I really like that about him.
Ah.
If you're developing any new story ideas right now, there's another book I should recommend you. I think you'd enjoy. I can't remember the name of the author, but the title, and it's a great title, is My Story Can Beat Up Your Story. And it's a fantastic look at how characters evolve in stories and ideas and archetypes you can think of when you're building your book out. I found it to be tremendously useful, and I see it in movies all the time. And I go, oh, that's what happened. Oh, that would happen. Save the Cat is another one I think a lot of people remember as well. That's more screenplays, but again, a lot of fun to apply to your movies and also to your books to see when they're doing certain things like, oh, here's where the character's going to have their worst moment. Oh, there's the belly of the beast. Oh, there's where the transition point is. You can spot them now. It's really funny.
Ah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely learning as well. And it's really great to learn from people that have actually like made it and they actually make a living from it. So I gather you're no longer like, you mentioned that you were a lawyer.
Way back in Mississippi. I mean, we're talking, I don't even want to say how long ago it was, but that was a long, long time ago. I call that the bad old days.
Oh, so you're not doing anything related to law at all anymore, not even consulting or no?
No, not even that. I left the legal field after only a year or two of practice. At the time, Silicon Valley was heating up. The dot-com boom was in full swing. I went more over in technology. That's actually where I started when I got into publishing through New York. I was selected to write a couple of their For Dummies books. You ever seen like those black and yellow books like DOS for Dummies, things like
Uh-huh.
that? I did a few of those. And once I got tired of writing in the nonfiction field, I decided to go into fiction and applied some of the similar lessons I learned from fiction into nonfiction.
Wow, that's amazing. So no one like the author that I also interviewed last week. So he had a different story as well. So everybody comes from different backgrounds. It doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, a doctor, or a teacher or a healthcare worker. What matters is you like to write books. So yeah, that's really comforting. Like it's really makes sense because as someone in healthcare, I'm like, oh my God, like why am I writing this? But it's really inspiring that you can come from any background and come up with. It's all about the story, that's waiting to be written.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There really is no degree system. There's no apprenticeship system. There's no guild holding you back. Thanks to the advent of the ebook, you're not even held back by the so-called gatekeepers in New York. Remember, in the old days, you would have to work for quite a while to create your book first, and then you try to find an agent to sell it or approach an editor directly. And even then, you're facing the rejection time and time again. Well, somebody asked me once, why is it there's so many, or why is it so difficult for writers to break in, and why is it so easy to give up, and how difficult is it to improve? And I told him, in my opinion, one of the main reasons was the length of the response cycle. By that I mean this: if you start a new job, let's say you were in the medical field, in your field, and you start a new job, you probably have about 3 months to know you're going to do fine in the job or not. They give you about 3 months to try you out. If it turns out you can't show up on time, or you can't figure out how to do the technical stuff, you're probably not going to make it. They'll ask you to go somewhere else. If you can, then you'll stay doing what you're doing and improve what you're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
what if you only showed up your job once every 3 years? After working your butt off to get ready for 3 years, you take one shot and they go, nope, not ready for you. Whatever. How easy would it be for you to improve? If you're at work at a regular job, every day you're getting feedback, direct, indirect, subtly, that yeah, I'm doing okay, or I better step my game up. You don't get that. A lot of the writers that used to get into the field before the advent of ebooks were short story writers. Think like Hemingway, for example. Ken Scholes was a modern fantasy author, did the same thing. They did a lot of short story writing and got good building up their skill by being purchased by magazines. And they knew from that, what did their audience want? What did the editor want? Could they write to a deadline? Nowadays, it's a lot more open, but that's why a lot of people don't understand you have to keep working at it and getting better.
So I gather, are you like into rapid release?
Well, I try to be. I really do try. It depends what stage you're at. If you're comparing me to a modern pulp author that can do 3 novels a year, 4 novels a year, I can't really say that. I can't really say I'm a rapid release author. But at the same time, I do usually do three books a year. Is that rapid though? I think it tests the patience of my fan base sometimes. I try to write faster, but at the same time, life happens. I'm still working on it. If Chris Fox watches this, he better know I'm still working on his 5,000 words a day book. So, 5,000 words an hour book. If I can get to that, yeah, I'm set.
Wow. Yeah. That's good to know that it's reassuring for new writers as well that you never really, you shouldn't rest on your laurels. You should always, learn. You should always enhance your craft. So it's a ongoing process, and you can never say you're there. That's
You never will. But that's part of the fun. I mean, this is the most fun job in the universe. I mean, that's why a lot of people want to do it. Think about it. I mean, you get to make up your own universe every day. You get to sit in a room and make stuff up, and that brings you money. I can't think of a better way to make a living than that, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Thank you very much for the information. And do you want to mention like a web page or a site? And you can also send me the link to your social media and any profile and stuff so I can share it.
I will send you that, but if anybody watches and wants to look me up, I keep a web page, not particularly anything interesting happening there. The best way to look at what's going on is take a look through my work and give it a sample, because my opening books to my series, I built a price funnel. It's called a price funnel in there. If you want to try my Centaur series, it's for free. The first book is completely free, and the other ones, you'll probably be dropping in price fairly soon. Look, Michael Angel on Amazon, you'll find me.
Oh yeah, I did find you on Amazon. It was pretty easy. I just wrote your name. Yeah. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this interview. I don't really want to take too much of your time because I know, writers, this has really been amazing. And I'm really grateful that you even took the time to, be interviewed. And, yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I wish you the best of luck with your book. You're in a good field. Romance always sells.
I know, yeah. I have to work on my craft and stuff and just balancing a regular job with this other stuff. And it's not always easy, but I'm inspired by you because you started in a different profession and you leveled up, Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll email you and email me anything that you'd like to share so I can put it on the show notes as well. So this is going to go on YouTube on Wednesday and also on my podcast, and I'll send you the link.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you. You're amazing. You rock.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. So that was our interview, and I have my co-host who's back. And it's Bacon, the annoying Bacon, so he wants to be part of the interview again, or the show. That was a really interesting interview. I really learned a lot from Michael Angel. So I learned about the importance of, first and foremost, your pitch, your storyline, or your blurb, as he calls it, your elevator pitch. That's really important in even starting the story. And even when you start to write the story, you must as a writer know how the story is going to play out and what's the story about. So that's been something that I've been hearing over and over again, the blurb or the pitch or the reason for writing the book has to be engaging. And I really like his thought process as well, and I learned a lot from him. And another thing that I learned from the author is the importance of having a good book cover, because he writes in a series and the book cover has to really be up to the genre's standards. So because people and readers have expectations on what a fantasy book looks like, a horror book looks like, and a romance book looks like. So he talks about that as well, and also with his titles as well. I really like that he really puts some thought into the title, and it's not just like, because and I think that's part of being a successful writer as well, is just to come up with titles that are engaging and that really talks about what your movie is about, and also specific to your genre as well. So that's really nice that I was able to have a sneak peek at his creative process, how he comes up with his pitch, how he comes up with his titles, and also the book covers as well. He mentioned that he hires book cover designers that are really, really doing that type of genre. So I think it's so it's like a specialist, I think. So he mentioned that you always have to go to a specialist, especially when it comes to book covers, which is really important. And I will also discuss that in other episodes. I'll be writing or making um, a blog post and also making a podcast topic on that one about books, book titles, book covers, and such. And another thing that I really found interesting after interviewing the author, I realized that people who are writers come from different backgrounds. So he started in law, and I think he went into the IT or technology, and then he is now a book author. He's a novelist, a self-published author, and a traditionally published author as well. So it doesn't matter where you come from, what background you come from. I think it's important that you have stories to tell, and there's always like people that are willing to listen to those stories, provided that you pitch them correctly and it's well written and it's really engaging to your particular market, or and that you cater to the genre that you're in. So it's really amazing. I actually have already downloaded his book because I also like medical thrillers. So he has a medical thriller out, and it's so very appropriate because it's like there's a pandemic right now, and I think he mentioned, which is really interesting, he writes about the coronavirus. So what a coincidence, right? And he said he wrote it last year. So that's really interesting. So yeah, the creative process is really interesting. You really don't know where you get your inspiration from, and that's the nice thing about being a writer and just putting yourself out there in the real world. You get like inspiration from so many different things, and as long as you're a creative person. So I really learned a lot from this interview, and I really thank the author. And I will be doing this series, like author interview series, and interspersed in between will be topics related to self-publishing. And it's really been inspiring, and it's inspired me as well to write more, to write better. And yeah, I already have like a lot of ideas on what to do and what not to do. And thank you very much for watching this. And I do apologize. There's always like this is my second author interview. There's always like technical issues for some reason, and hopefully in time I would really get better at this. And I really do appreciate your understanding. And then even if this is not like professionally done yet, at least I'm still producing this content because I know a lot of people really want to hear what the interview is about, and it might help them, and even inspire them. And thank you very much. And so this has been So You Think You Can Write, a podcast. Thank you.